the last session overrun, so it gave me about 2 minutes to set up, which is always nice. Always a nice start to the session. Hopefully you're here to see 3ds Max. If not, I'm not going to be offended if you get up and leave. That's all good. So, what I'm going to do is, for about 40 minutes or so, we're going to have a look at some workflows and some customer work. So this work is from a company called North Kingdom. If you've seen that, if you was in the main stage, it's the same Chester tiger cheetah thing that we were looking at in that main stage session. So this is kind of what I had in mind to go through for the next 40 minutes. We're going to obviously look at the workflows from going from Max over to Motion Builder Box to see some of the kind of hidden little gems inside of that workflow. Can I look at viewport canvas? It's one of the areas that I see so many people using 3ds Max never actually kind of use it, and it's a beautiful little workflow because it's basically a mini Photoshop sat inside of your copy of 3ds Max. Really good, really powerful, and it's a great way of texturing, because if you're anything like me, you probably absolutely hate texturing. That's part of the job that I hate. So viewport canvassing, workflows, really nice and tidy. And then we're going to have a look at a feature that you've had in 3ds Max from version 2010, I think it was, we added it in, and that's called Craft Direct Studio, which is brilliant for animating vehicles, airplanes, cars, those types of things. But it's also fantastic if you just want to put a camera in there really quick and easy and fly your camera around. So it's a really great little workflow. If you're using Max from 2010, I'm sure it's 2010 onwards, then you've already got a free license of this, so you might as well use it. It's a superb little workflow. Playtest original, speaking of that main stage. If you missed it, right. Let's go over to 3ds Max 2012, and let's just quickly grab this file. Okay, so this is the character we're going to have a look at. Hopefully you'll notice what the viewports are doing. You've got nice adaptive ambient occlusion, you've got the progressive refinement of the shadows. So if I grab hold of my little mate Chester, and let's just try to spin him around a little bit, you'll see the shadows go light, and then when we kind of mouse up or the viewport stays static for a few seconds, it goes through and starts refining those shadows. Brilliant, it's supposed to do that, because that's what ensures that you get the super fast performance with large data sets. So that's a really good thing. But anyway, that side, this is the fellow that we're working on. We've assumed we've done all the hard work of modelling. Obviously, as you know, in 3ds Max, that would take like 2 minutes to model, it would have been fine. And then what we're going to do is do the texturing side of things. So this is kind of the state that we want to get into. You guys are really quiet. I think you're the quiet audience about the ages. You're not booing or... Yeah, heckling's good. Normally people heckle, it's cool. Normally it's Rob at the back that's heckling, my work colleague. Anyway, let's come out of that viewport. What I'm going to do is take it out of the realistic mode, which is that nitrous viewport shadow system. It gives you all that nice ambient occlusion, reflections, and all that sort of thing directly in the viewport. And I'm going to put it just into normal shaded mode. Simply because if I'm doing all my texturing, I don't want my shadows to interfere with the texturing work that I'm going to do onto that model. Pretty obvious stuff. Now, to first off even, I'm going to do Shift and T, bring up our asset tracking system that we have inside of 3ds Max. Go to the jewel icon, basically the product logo, pull down and you'll see asset tracking as part of that. So the reason why I use the asset tracking extensively isn't for the obvious things of kind of knowing what your texture's doing or any point cache, any kind of recording movements, none of that. I use this purely for this one little feature here, this custom dependencies. That allows me to tag data into the file, like Word documents, Notepad files, images, anything that's a file that's on your computer or central server location, I tag into that file. So if I'm off ill, then I know the other guy in the studio can pick up the file, dive into the asset tracker, and everything it needs is there. It doesn't have to come through server locations, it doesn't have to find Word documents that give me the status of the project. So easy process, all you do is right click, navigate down to where it says custom dependencies, click on that and just drop the file straight into the scene, and that's saved into the file. Really nice little function. But what we've done over here is if we right click, we can go down and that can take you straight to the Explorer location I know it's a little bit fuzzy, so you just have to trust me with what I'm saying. You can go down to the actual Windows Explorer location, or you've got view image file. So I will tag in kind of my reference photography that I just know that I need to keep coming back to, rather than going through Windows Explorer and trying to find all that data. It's a minor little thing, but over the length of the project, it saves me a huge amount of time. Okay, so that's my cuddly soft toy Chester, and that's what I'm going to use as kind of my reference to start painting on my 3ds Max model. So let's kind of pull this chap across to one side for a minute. Let's kind of get him front on a little bit, and let's just minimise that down just a little bit over there. Okay, so the next things I need to do is come across to my tool options, go down, and you've got this little option here called Viewport Canvas. We'll load that up, and I'll just dock this over here on the right-hand side for a second. Now this is where I'm going to use all my Photoshop-esque workflow. Obviously the icon's pretty obvious what they're going to do. The eraser icon is going to be your eraser, cloning, buckets, gradient fills, paintbrush, colour dodge, colour burn, all your standard Photoshop ways of working. Now this isn't designed to replace Photoshop at all in your workflow, it's designed to complement it. So the easy, quick things, do inside the 3ds Max, kick it over to Photoshop, because there might be a particular brush in Photoshop perhaps that you need. So it's designed to get you off and going in the quickest way possible, and to stop that backwards and forwards, which is generally a bit of a bottleneck. So from there, what I need to do is click on the paint, and then I choose what type of thing I want to paint. So whether it's an ambient, whether it's a diffuse, a specular, glossiness, whether it's displacement maps, bumps, you know, all these types of maps that you're hopefully familiar with from a terminology point of view, we can paint in if you want to. So I'm going to go for the obvious one, and we go for a diffuse colour. Now, in this particular case, you've got an exact size requirement you can numerically input, or just choose a quick preset. So I'm going to go for 1000 pixel texture on this particular character, which hopefully you agree is kind of fairly standard. I'll talk to you, because you're the only person nodding. Everybody else is quite green. Yeah, fantastic, good. Right, what I'm going to do from there is just save this down, and I can choose what type of file format I want to save it as. So let's just drop it onto my desktop, and you can see I practiced this a minute ago. So let's call it just 1K. I know that I want to save it as a PNG file. So rather than me hunting through the file format list, I'm just going to type .png or .jpg, you know, whatever file format it is I want, and it's automatically going to recognise that rather than you having to hunt through that list. So minor little things, but saves you a little bit of time. Choose what type of bit res I want, if I want alpha channels, if I want it insulated, all these typical options that I'm sure you're very familiar with. From there, I'm then going to choose what I want as my base colour. So we've got a colour swatch, which you've probably seen 1,000 times in 3ds Max. And I want to set up its main kind of predominant primary colour on the model. So I can individually go through and start filling around the colour swatch, or if I choose my pipette icon, I can choose any area of my Windows display and just pick that individual colour. Again, minor little things, but save you a ridiculous amount of time when you're in a bit of a rush and you want to get to the pub as quick as possible. So I'm going to go for that as my base colour. Let's say OK. It's now going to make me a PNG file. The nice thing about this is it's also making me a PSD file under the hood as well. So you're doing your PNG files, you're doing the targets, OpenXRs, whatever it is, but it's also making you a Photoshop, a native PSD file. So from there, let's start going in. And the very first thing you should do, or at least the very first thing I will always do, is drop in a new layer, like in Photoshop. You generally don't want to paint on that background layer straight away. Start layering things up, hopefully, unless you're in a bit of a rush where you probably just cut as many corners as possible. So the very first thing I need to do is come through and start painting in the primary area. So let's go for his belly, that's probably the second most noticeable area. As I'm moving around, hopefully you can see that colour swatch, that brush, directly onto my model. Now this isn't a circle like we're seeing in the viewport, this is basically a sphere of information. So however this sphere is held on the model, that's where it's going to affect. So think you're pushing a sphere around rather than a circle, if that makes any sense at all. Hold down Shift and Control, left click changes interactively the size of your brush, and you obviously see it visually in the viewport. Shift itself does a hardness and an erase. Shift and Alt and left click will do the opacity. So nice little shortcuts, the same shortcuts you have in 3ds Max for doing push-pull paint and deformations to geometry. But for me, what I need to do obviously is go in and let's just change the hardness of that brush, because we don't want that kind of feather effect. I'll just reduce down the size of the brush. Remember, Shift, Control, left click, and let's just quickly give it the white fill. And then whilst I'm over this area of my model, I'll also pull up my colour palette, which of course I can say drop into the folder structure as well. So we've got a nice white model at the minute. Let's go through and just quickly drop a white belly on this little chap, on little Chester. Okay, next areas to look at are nose. That's probably the next predominant area of this model. Now I've got a couple of problems. Obviously I'm going to split it up to a new layer, and if I right click I can rename it and call it something obvious like nose or node, if I can spell. Call it nose. Say okay, everything's all split up into layers, and of course I can turn those layers on and off. I can change the opacity of those layers if I of course select the right layer. So you treat it as if it is just a normal Photoshop. Now this is kind of an obvious area. If I press Ctrl R to spin around in my viewport, push that model around, you see if I paint in that nose area there, because it's geometry, it obviously affects the whole mesh. Yeah? Now this is where, let's just quickly undo that, this is where working in a 3D environment really is beneficial, because you have the choice. You can do it directly 3D onto the model, or we can do it in a more traditional way, drop it into our 2D view straight away, and you can see that okay on the viewport, so that's good. Middle mouse button to zoom in, middle hold, pan it around, and because this has already got the UV done to it, I can go through and very badly go through and paint in just the nose area, and obviously that fills just his nose. But I've still got a true dynamic link between my 2D layers and that individual model as well. So minor little things, but incredibly powerful to give you the flexibility of working what suits you for that type of geometry later on. Once you're happy with it, close it down, and that's obviously all done on the layer. Now from there, this is where we get to really kind of show how powerful this tool set is. Again, going to go in, add in a new layer, because of course I want that flexibility. From there, we're going to go in and choose our randomised options, because the next stage for us is putting in all these individual kind of spots. But they are obviously all individual sizes, and that's going to take a bit of time to do if I individually place them. So I'm going to let 3ds Max do all the hard work for me. Go to my randomise options, enable brush radius, and give it a numerical range of min and maximum values. So let's say min of 10 units, maximum of 30, and if I do it just with the sphere, it's going to look a bit crappy. Crappy is a technical 3D term, by the way, if you are taking notes. So rather than doing it that way, what I'm going to do is make a quick mask inside of Photoshop and load that directly in. So I've got a couple of sample ones that ship with 3ds Max, and then I've made just a simple splotch. You know, when you've got downtime in the office, just make some quick brushes. See what brushes you've got in Photoshop that are particularly useful, and just make a quick template so you can use them inside of 3ds Max. So I'm going to go for this one for the time being. And now, because I've got a mask layer, that mask is applied directly to my brush. So let's spin that chap around, let's go through and start painting, and obviously 3ds Max is deciding roughly what size it wants to do, depending on the weather and what's happening and how Max is feeling. It's going to choose a randomised option between that scaling range that we added, and add that even directly to my model. Now the nice thing about working like this is you can be kind of really unprecise. You know, unprecise is certainly a good thing when you're in a bit of a rush. So we can drop them in, and then we can use our layer options over here on the right hand side. We can then start to push that layer around using move, rotate and scale. But what's really good is if we go back to our reference photograph on the left, it could be soft toy Chester, you'll notice the white area on his body is obviously got no black splotches over the top. So I can go in there and individually start raising those, or again, because I'm a big fan of laziness, I'm just going to change the layer order like you would do in Photoshop, and obviously all that's then respected and pushed through the entire model. So we're getting there. Starting to look kind of Chestery-ish. Now, the next little stage I want to go through is perhaps my favourite area of working with this viewport canvas tool, just the way in which it integrates with some of the other options inside of 3ds Max. Obviously, if you're using a stylus, you know, all of that hooks straight into this system as well. So a Wacom stylus. Now, what I want to do is go up to my rendering options, and I'm going to go through and render off things like surface maps. You ever use these at all? Yeah, so you have. Brilliant. Okay, I can tell you anything about these now, and you'll believe me. You've never used them around. What I'm going to do is go through and I'm just going to render off, say, a dust map. So hit that, straight away it's done. So that's a 512 resolution dust map that it's made for me. So it's looked at the geometry and said, what's pointing upwards, apply white to that, what's pointing sideways and downwards, apply black to that. Now obviously I'm working with a 1K image, so I need to go through, start off with, and use my preset, drop that on for size, hit dust map again, and then in a couple of seconds it's looked at your geometry and made the individual map for me. Now the nice thing about this workflow is you won't be doing it on a projector, so you'll be able to grab that top of that area quite easily. But I can go in there, copy that image, and now that's held in just the Windows kind of memory, like you would do any kind of control copy in Windows. And that allows me then to come into a layer, come through, go up to File, and paste directly from the clipboard straight back onto the model. Now, for those of you that are still awake, you'll notice that there's one quite obvious problem that I've got now with doing that. All that hard work I've done to the layer is kind of lost, and if I change layer order, it's not really going to affect it. But the nice thing about working in this way is you can still use all your blending modes like you would do inside of Photoshop for that individual layer. And that again will be respected when you take that over to Photoshop directly. All those blending modes are still kept, opacity weightings are still individually kept. So let's go for something like maybe a multiply. We can grab down the opacity of the layer. Maybe on this projector we might just go for something like perhaps a colour burn, so we can kind of clearly see what that's doing. Let's pump that up a little bit. So the dust map is particularly good, but you've also got a whole host of extra little maps like the cavity map. Again, really useful for adding in all this extra detail, and it does it super quick. And that's where this workflow is really beneficial, because just hit the button, see what it does, and if you don't like it, throw it away. You've only wasted, a second or two. So the cavity map is particularly good, and then of course the density map, again, really incredibly useful. Also you've got occlusion maps if you're used to doing ambient occlusion and these types of things. Again, really fast ways of going through, looking at the model, generating bitmaps that you can then use directly onto your model. So if you don't want to calculate ambient occlusion at render time because it's too memory intensive, put it straight onto your model. So let's go through. Let's just quickly copy that, hold it into memory. Let's go through, add on a second layer, pull it in, paste it on clipboard, that's applied, and let's go for something like a overlay. Pull down the opacity on that a little bit. Now that's giving me all this nice detail kind of around his nose area. So we can very quickly start throwing in the textures, kind of building up that image to suit what we want it to do for that individual model. Okay, so we've kind of got it to a stage, and you'll have to use a little bit of imagination with me here. But we spent a bit of time, finished off the model, and now we're going to pass it off to the studio lead to say what a terrible job I've done on the texture. But we're going to get him to finally approve it. So once we're happy, we just kind of come out to that brush tool, and we go down, and we have a couple of choices. Now I want to keep my workflow nice and intact, so later on, I can bring back all those layers directly inside of 3ds Max. So I want to make sure that my workflow is kind of really nice and enables me to make changes. So from there, what I'm going to do is go in and save it as a PSD, and then put all of that, and put it straight back in to that actual texture. So we're going to save as a PSD, and then replace the PNG file directly onto the model that I've made. So let's go through, let's call it Chester 1K bluegfx. Say save, and now that's saved as a PSD and put back into the material structure of that model. So now I'm just going to fire up Photoshop and we'll kind of show you what you get directly inside Photoshop. So you know there's no smoke and mirrors. For me, this is really beneficial workflow if you're in a studio environment, because often you can spend all this time working on the models and miss kind of small little things with regards to the texturing. So it's always good to pass it off to somebody else. And I called it Chester 1K Blue. Let's fire that up. Opens up the file for me. With, notice the name structures, with all the layers, with all the blending modes, all automatically applied. So from there I can go in there, add in a new layer, because this is a nice bi-directional process with regards to Max and Photoshop. So I add in a new layer. Let's give it well, studio managers are like school teachers, aren't they? They like to shade at you, so we'll go for a nice red brush. Let's press B, let's just increase the brush size. My studio manager even, is going to say that area there is shocking, that area there is rubbish, that's rubbish, and that's rubbish, and start again, that's rubbish as well. Come back through, go down, we're just going to save that PSD file. Once that's then saved across, directly on my model, all of that's brought across with all my layer conventions as well. So even though I'm working in a 3D space, I know exactly that my artist, my studio lead thinks that's rubbish, delete that area. And that's kind of a really nice, powerful thing. For me, I think that's a very, very strong workflow. Okay, so we've done the texturing side. Now let's move on to, say, the animation. So let's just reset this down. Let's just get rid of those menus for a second. And let's pull up the animation side of things. So in the clip that Norkington makes, Chester kind of talks directly to camera and does like a we need you kind of to join our army, destroy lots of Cheeto crisps, waste as much time as possible by playing our game. So to have that talking to camera process, let's go through and kind of set him up in, again, the easiest way possible. So first off, I'm going to go across to my edit options. And you've got this nice little function in Max, been in there quite a while, called the transform toolbox. Anybody use this? Excellent. So transform toolbox, fantastic little feature just for this one little option over here. If I spin, so again, Control R to spin around in the viewport, how I'm looking at that model depends on how it's going to make subsidiary versions or duplicates of that head. So over here you've got an option called Quick Clone. If I hit that Quick Clone button, it basically puts the model to the right of it. If I'm looking at it from the top view, hit Quick Clone, it's going to stack him on top. If I'm looking at it from the side, it's then going to stack it up to the right. Really simple little things, but the ability to save you a little bit of time rather than doing shift, hold, drag, copy, instance, have a couple of windows up here and give you those options. The ability just to open up your toolbox and just quickly hit Quick Clone and get those models directly in your viewport. Minor little thing, again, but over the space of the day, saves you quite a bit of time. Some other nice little options about why I would recommend you have this transform toolbox either docked or constantly open. So just little things like this, having presets to rotate your model, you know, at 5-degree increments, or to step it down and do a quick 90-degree flip over to one side. Again, minor things, but that little toolbox really can save you a bit of time, and that will also work with scaling as well. You can get the properties from one model using the get icon up here, get the properties from one model and paste it back onto the original. Really powerful little functionality. Okay, now for the sake of this, let's just go into my materials and turn them into shaded light maps so you can kind of see a little bit clearer what's happening directly onto our models. Okay, so let's go across to this guy over here first off. And let's choose correct viewport options. Let's go across to edit. And of course, hopefully if you're working with Max, you're using Edit Poly over Edit Mesh for performance reasons and for tool functionality reasons. Now obviously here, sorry, excuse me, I want to do that kind of talking jaw movement. So obvious way of doing that is use vertex and hopefully use soft selection, something that you've used many times before. But one little option of soft selection is an area that's generally overlooked, and that's this edge distance option over here. If you don't have that on, you'll see what it does. It looks at the vertex and then looks at all of them around that model. Now what I'm doing is I'm saying, look at the distance from the vertex that's attached to the next vertices. But so because the mouth, the jaw is separate to the top area, they're basically two separate areas of the model, it recognises there's an air gap. Again, minor little things, but from a workflow point of view, that saves you a huge amount of time not having to worry about kind of selecting the exact area that you want on that model. So let's go through, let's just kind of change, make some quick variations. Let's select that little chap there, let's hold down Control, select that side there, pull his cheeks up maybe, grab a couple of areas above that eye there, pull that one up, and then let's get to this one and say, well, I need to now put his mouth in a slightly different position, and I like what I did over here, so I need to reproduce that into this one. So again, one of the easiest ways to do that is to come across, select the model you need, put it into vertex mode, turn off soft selection, and then come up to the graphite tools. Again, there's 100 variations of tool sets that you can only access in the graphite tool sets. Now, one of these options allows you to come in, let's go into polygon mode, and go into these symmetry tools. These are really, really powerful options. Let's just put this across to one side for a second. Let's just put that over there. And what I'm able to do is say, well, I like that area of the mesh that I've just done. So like what we did with the images, I'm now going to copy that, hold it in Windows memory, come across to our little chappy over here. Let's just put him across to one side. Put it into vertex mode, not worry about these selections, and just say paste that directly onto the model. So it looks at the vertex positions of the model you've got, compares to what it was, and then matches the two on the selection that I made. Again, minor little things, but if you've got to duplicate a vertex, edge poly, positioning, transform positions, that one little option will save you a huge amount of time. Now, one other little area I just want to kind of quickly highlight on this last little chat. Let's go through, let's close that down for a second so we've got a bit more screen real estate to work with. And that's using some of the freeform options. So I want to work with my paint deformation tools. I'm just going to undock that, have it floating directly in my viewport. And I'm going to choose the shift option. Let's put it on the nose so we can see it. So this is the same workflow we went through when we did the textures, but basically now two spheres. So it's again a 3D sphere brush, not just a circle. And if I hold Shift, Control, Left click, that does the strength of that brush. Shift, Alt, Left click is kind of the weighting value, how much focus that has. And just Shift itself is the fall off between the two brushes themselves. So the soft selection, S options. Let's kind of bring those two down for a second. Let's just decrease that fall off area. And now that enables me to go in and say, well, I quite like that area of the model pushed up there. That ear, I'd probably like to be there. Maybe I want to just raise his eyebrow a little bit. The cheek area, I just want to kind of puff out, very badly puff out, and just grab his nose area. And of course, I can still do things like rotating that geometry as well. And over here, I've also got scaling options to allow me to scale parts of the geometry. Once I'm happy with those options, top right-hand corner of that floating graphite returns it to its original position. Again, minor little things that really speed up the workflow. Okay, so let's pull that across to one side, because now I need to get all that data obviously back onto this head over here. So let's go through, let's drop on a morpher modifier, and from there I need to load each individual head into each individual slot on that morpher modifier. So the easiest way for me to do that is go through and just load multiple targets, select all of the objects in my geometry, in my viewport. Then once they're loaded, I can say, well, just delete them. Because now they're all pushed directly onto that geometry. From there, I'll just turn on my animate key, go through, and let's just grab some of those spinner values. Let's kind of increase that one. Let's just quickly knock in some very, very thoughtful probably animation that I'm sure will shock you. Obviously with spinners, if you right click on spinner, that returns it to its default value. So let's just quickly knock in some of those. Push those up. Let's go to that one. And let's just go to that. There. And then let's just quickly zero those. Press N again, turns off the animation, and now we've got our Chester talking to you saying how great that workflow is. And it's a very quick, very kind of crude process that we've gone through to get you talking, but get that straight over to your customer and say, this is what we're going to do, do you like how it's kind of moving, and get that sign off. So that's a really great workflow because it's only taking you a couple of minutes, and if they don't like it, just throw it away. You haven't lost anything apart from those couple of quick things. So that's some of the reasons why perhaps you should have a look at the kind of graphite toolset system. It's a very nice way of working. Okay, so now let's move on to a final area. So I've got 10 minutes, so let's go for... Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to get Chester to move for us. So it's got a standard biped rig on there with extra bones added in. The naming convention is a standard naming convention, and we've quickly rigged him up. Now I spent no more than just 10 minutes rigging him up, because again I want to get this information over to the customer as quick as possible and say, do you like how this little Chester is moving? So we can go in there and start loading on motion capture, but my customer's got a very precise type of motion that I want it to do. So the easiest way for me to do that is just to kind of go through and do a little bit of performance capture. So from there, let's just leave him as he is. What I'm going to do is go through, and we're going to send it directly out to, this case, we're going to send it directly to Motion Builder. So if you were using the 2012 versions, you should see that send to option, and if you've got any of the individual products on there, it will recognise them and build a dynamic link between the two. So we're going to send this through as a completely new scene, and obviously you can see from the options what it says. Now this area of the viewport and the workspace that you cannot see is probably the most important area whilst it's doing this. But basically what it's doing is it's firing off Motion Builder, which the big splash screen shows you. It's opening it up from scratch. It's saying that the guys at Blue need to get better projectors. And it's saying it's changing the screen res to work on this particular model. So, grabs all that data, grabs all that biped data, pushes it directly across into the viewport, pulls all the materials through, and what it's done under the hood is built me an FBX model. Now luckily Motion Builder is a little bit kinder to me on this projector, because the area at the bottom of Max that we saw is nicely underneath the viewport inside the Motion Builder. That there says that it's got a connection directly to 3ds Max with a big update button next to it, so I can send that data back to 3ds Max at any particular minute. Now what I need to do is let's just spin that little chappy around. We're going to go through into my display mode and turn on X-ray. And what that's allowing me to do is look at the rig that's underneath. So this is basically my biped rig. From there I'm going to go through my character modes and tell it that it's a 3ds Max biped. So you've got a 3ds Max biped template directly inside a Motion Builder. So let's pull that across, drop it directly onto one of the bones. Let's just say onto that bone. A little window appears, it says characterize, and basically turns it into a character. Motion Builder doesn't know what it was before we turn it into a character. That now shows me how bad my rigging is. So this is a traffic light system. Green is good, amber's okay, red is bad. Now the minute, most of it, I know it's not, but let's pretend most of it is green, so I've done a good job. But amber is telling me that really I should change those bone positions and kind of level them off a little bit. But in this case, I'm not going to worry about it. From there, I'm going to minimise all this down for a second. Well, let's get rid of Photoshop. As we all know, Photoshop is fairly memory intensive. And then I'm going to use this little chappy to do my animation. Because again, you know, as I said, when I do animation, texturing, really lazy. When I do animation, pretty lazy as well. So I'm going to use my Xbox Connect, and there you are, wave, because then you'll be on camera. All right, thanks again to you for waving. Okay, we're going to use this to do the recording animation for me. Now, this is kind of where we get to really have some fun. So, this is a fairly dark room, so maybe let's stick it into infrared mode so we get a better scan, probably just as bad on this screen. Let's go for visible light. So this is a full real-time OBJ scan that it's doing at the minute. This is a piece of software from brekel.com, brekel.com, guy based out in the Netherlands. This little bit of software is free. The Xbox Connect is £100. The tripod is about £20. What I'd recommend you do is buy it. You get the tripod for 20 quid, throw that away, and keep just the tripod head, because then you can attach it to a proper tripod, you know, a nice Manfrotto tripod. So it's worth it just for the tripod head. So about £100, you buy it separately, you get a power supply because you need that extra juice to power it. The next thing I need is a beautiful assistant. Sol, you're the man, cheers.
Hey, we're working out.
Yeah, again, hope you're all in the 3D field, so you've all got good imagination, which is why I called Sol a beautiful chap. Let's pull that across. Move a little bit. So it now recognises that, hey look, there's Sol, he's a person. If I walk into shot, it recognises that, hey look, there's another person. Particularly good, right, for something that's free. So Sol's staying there, he recognises it's a user. Sol lives near St Albans, so he's used to being mugged, so put your hands up like you're being mugged. Hold that pose for a minute. It's now tracked all the marker points directly onto it. Drop your arms down. Notice the tracking points are still working. This little bit of software is free.
Is it PC only?
Hold that for a second. Do you know, I don't know. I've not looked if there's a Mac version. I've not looked.
What is it called?
Okay, brekel.com. brekel.com. Yeah. Don't get carried away, so don't show off. Right, hold that pose for a minute. And what we're going to do is just minimise this for a bit because, you know, that's all good, but we need to use that data. So I'm going to go across to my devices. I'm going to drop a Brekel command DLL directly in my viewport, turn it on, make it live, tell it to make me a little stick man. Hold that pose for a minute, get roughly in the same position as Chester for me. Great. From there, what we do is go up to characters and now say that this is a character also. We drop that on, characterise it. This now says what type of character is he? Is he a horse or is he a person? Kind of person, I guess, maybe. Vaguely. This is now a biped. Don't think this is a 3ds Max biped. It's a two-legged person biped. So, kind of an important-ish area. From there, what we now do is say that the source of Chester is going to go through and let's go into the right option. The source of Chester is now Brekel. So now you wave at the audience up. Now we can very quickly animate Chester. And if we want it to be recorded, we just hit the big record button, it makes an FBX file that we can pass directly through. That's the campus Chester on there. Now this is kind of a real important area though. What Sol's doing now, you know, that's spinning. If you've ever done motion capture or performance capture, as people prefer to call it, you'll notice when markers get occluded, the model generally freaks out because it doesn't know where that marker point's gone to. For £100 with a free bit of software with Motion Builder, you don't have any of those problems. Now you're not going to use this for the final kind of performance capture, motion capture, but this is great for blocking, you know, just getting the basic animation done. Think how long it would take to make that animation if you were manually keyframing it. That's what's really powerful for me. Yeah, so once he goes out of shot, you should see that Chester kind of stops working because obviously it's out.
Did you ever try and run here beforehand?
So no, unfortunately I picked on it, so I normally like picking on it. Do you want to do it?
Set it up. No, thanks. Just set it up. I just knew it was going to work. It's amazing. Right.
Yeah, we've done, I mean, if any of you have seen kind of this presentation before we're using the Connect, there's never any worries with it.
Back.
Not at all. It doesn't make any difference. It's because it's got the Xbox Connect is one of the best pieces of software kind of hardware out there. You know, the fact that it's sending out real-time scans all the time, it's got an inbuilt video camera, it's £100, you know, it's one of the best devices out there. It's absolutely fantastic. Because if we go back to that Brekel piece of software very quickly, this OBJ scan that it's doing real time, you can export out as OBJs and pop straight back into your.
Just show the 3D me.
And so it's sending it, it's like a ray trace render engine. It's sending out straight lines, recording that data. That's an OBJ from these options up here that you can export out and drop into your 3D application if you want to. Really powerful little piece of kit.
I have a question. You had like tiny shape on the model when you build them.
Yeah.
What is that shape coming from?
That's just a sampling rate. So whoever asked that, there's a sampling rate. There's a slider inside of the Brekel little piece of software where you can scrub through the slider and get better accuracy if you do get any of that jitter. It's just that I did not bother. Okay, so again, if you're doing motion capture really quick, you do recording, pass that back into 3ds Max, then use your standard iPad Max tools directly onto the model. Again, great way of doing animation. Super fast, super easy, get that job out the door as quick as possible. So I believe time-wise that's kind of it. There were some other things I was going to show you, but what I'd recommend you do, what I was going to show you was the Craft Studio tools in use. We've all got access to those, really great, fantastic free tools for doing cameras, cars, aeroplanes, those types of things. But if you go to this website, which is my blog. There's a link that takes you to a webinar where that workflow is perfectly recorded. If you are on Twitter, then that's my address, so follow that and I'll send you tips and all sorts.
You've got info on this setup.
There is info on this particular workflow on the-area.com by a fantastic Max guy called Louis Montreal, based out in Montreal, and he's documented this entire workflow. We'll go to the Breckle website, and it's fully labelled. The workflow is there. Again, they're free DLLs you can drop directly inside Motion Builder, and the whole process is documented for you as well. Bear in mind that this particular workflow has only been out for about 6 months. You know, Sony only released the SDK for this about 6 months ago, and there's already some great tech being done for it. But when you use it in conjunction with 3ds Max Motion Builder, that really opens up quite a big world of possibilities. So we're at an interesting time in the CG industry. So anyway, if you want further detail, go to that blog, go to that Twitter site, hopefully get more info. So apologies that it was slightly rushed, obviously overrunning, but hopefully it's been of use. Thanks for your time, and see you later on.